We've spoken on this channel about South Africa's case that they brought to the International Court of Justice against Israel, accusing Israel of genocide. This was back in December, back in the very early days, relatively early days of Israel's military action in response to the October 7th attacks. Um, this is, you know, th this was already a part of the pro-Hamas PR campaign. So Francesca Albanese, the former UN rapporteur on the Middle East, called this a genocide accused Israel of committing a genocide against the Palestinians within days of October 7th, when no serious military action, certainly no ground operation, had even started. And this had become more and more of a part of the jargon of the pro-Hamas side. We talked a lot about Owen Jones. Owen Jones, eased his way into this by saying, "Look, I don't know, it might be a genocide. I'm not saying it's a genocide, but the experts are saying it." And of course, the language used against Israel has escalated alongside the protests, and this case that South Africa brought was super important in within that role because within that general attacks on Israel, because it shows that, look, it's now official. It's brought to a court. It's a country. Never mind which country and what type of a country it is, and who that country's friends and allies are. But now it's official. How can you deny it if it's brought to the International Court of Justice, the highest court in the world, as I've seen some leftists refer to it. Um, but yeah. South Africa is now having trouble. They were supposed to give evidence for Israel's alleged genocide, and they have asked for the deadline for such evidence to be extended. It was due at the end of last month. Um, it's they need a few more months, they say, to compile such evidence. It's not clear whether the court is okay with that. We've heard reports that they're not going to allow it. But it's interesting, the International Court of Justice, um, much like pretty much all of these international bodies, is um, a type of uh, enforcement of international laws, which are laws that only apply to those who accept them, which is only civilized and semi-civilized countries, and is used by uncivilized countries like the regime of South Africa, like Egypt, who joined this case, as another weapon in the war against the West. So it's interesting that even with everything set up for success for South Africa, they are having trouble um, pushing this forward. Welcome to the Daily Objective. I know people expected a different topic. We made a last minute decision to switch the topics between the Daily Objective and the reality show because we have a lot more to say on the latter topic for the reality show. So, but we do have a lot to say about this, some of which I've just said, and some of which Daniel will say. Daniel, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much since South Africa has brought this case to the ICJ, we've been talking about it. So I think this started around December, and we've been saying or hoping that Israel wouldn't even go because, again, it's something that we've called it's a kangaroo court. There's no uh, the the you know the standard is so impossible that yeah, any sort of action, any sort of defensive action against any nation can be said it's genocide, and that's the standard that has been applied uh from so many people. I mean, I've been just going into Twitter and like seeing what people are saying about that. And the sort of arguments people are using against Israel are showing that it's clearly the standard is just to stop Israel. It's not they don't care about they don't care about the genocide. It's simply Israel doesn't have a cannot defend itself and should just let itself be destroyed. I've seen uh because some people have been claiming that, yeah, South Africa basically has no evidence yet, or any evidence that would help it. Although maybe just to you know to bring people into what's happening. So there was a decision earlier this year that basically the term plausible case for genocide, and it has been misconstrued at what it means, but the sort of like what it meant is that ICJ has ruled that South Africa has a right to bring this case to them, and basically they gave them time. Okay, you have this amount of time to basically bring the actual evidence that it's happening, and then we can rule on the actual genocide. Usually, these sort of things just take like years, and most of the genocides are basically decided that there were genocides usually long time after they have happened. Uh, so this has happened, and yeah, yeah, I'm just trying to collect my thoughts because we were supposed to do the other topic. So
All right. Well, while you collect your thoughts, I will reply to some comments in the chat. Victoria says the South African people are very different from the government. I'm South African. I prefer people understand that there's a huge difference between the ANC and the people. And yeah, we understand that. I mean, we know that because we have many viewers from South Africa. And when we discussed this back in, I think it was January that we did a few episodes about South Africa. We had that was the month where I think most of our viewership came from South Africa, and people were telling us. And we know that we don't need to be told, but it's always nice to hear that. Yeah, there are many good people in South Africa, people who support Israel, people who are disgusted by their own government. But the fact is, the government is who it is, regardless of whether you want it. I mean, that's we said that when people were saying about Trump, not my president. He is your president, whether you want to or not. And yeah, we absolutely encourage and hope the people of South Africa can have better government in the future, as many countries need. Best Monster says South Africa hasn't condemned Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Yes, I think they would have some funding issues if they did that, and they have no funding issues condemning Israel. Um, Paul says Owen Jones still opens every video with quote, the ongoing genocide. Yeah, I haven't seen Owen Jones videos in a while. Owen Jones blocked me on X, and I haven't been following his tweets or his videos, but I do think it's been way too long since we've done a video reminding people of who Owen Jones is, and what that means about the UK and our culture. The fact that somebody like that is so prominent and is so openly anti-Semitic and openly, willingly, basically creating propaganda for people who would love to throw him off a building if they could. But then again, they're trying to get rid of the Jews right now, so he's on board with that. Um, Right. I also had something else. Yeah. One more point is that as with these things, as we often say when we cover the headlines and the way headlines tell a story, the story the headlines tell, and why it's important for that side to put those headlines out there as soon as possible, and why it was important for South Africa to do this, knowing they might never win this case. It might take years, knowing, in the long run, it's victory is unlikely, but the victory isn't meant to be in the long run. This was not done in order to win the ICJ case. I'm sure they'd be happy to if they did win it. But the goal is to put it out there, to put that word out there, to put it in common usage when people talk about Israel. We talked about the BBC a few days ago in the report about them, and the fact that they use the word genocide in relation to Israel supposedly committing a genocide against the Palestinians. 14 times, right? More than the number of times they said that about the Palestinians who openly say they want to exterminate the Jews, while Israel goes out of its way to avoid civilian casualties when trying to prevent the Palestinian people from exterminating the Jews. So the point was to put it out there. Once it's out there, like the Al Ali hospital bombing, it's out there. It's out there, and then that's the headline. And then on page 20 something, there's the retraction the next day, and what people remember is the headline. Even now, look at do you see this story everywhere? No. You saw the story of the court case. You saw the story of South Africa bringing this to the ICJ. You saw the hearings. You saw all that live in the headlines for weeks. You do not see anywhere, pretty much in mainstream media, certainly not as the top headline of the news of the day, that South Africa is basically saying, yeah, we said this is true, but we have no evidence to support it. So, yeah, Daniel.
Um, Yeah, I mean, so earlier someone mentioned the AAC and sort of like it doesn't represent the people. Well, the fact is South Africa had an election and ANC was elected again. So while, I'm definitely not saying that there are not people, there are people in Ireland that are against this, there are people in South Africa that are against it, there are people in Spain against it. The fact is that majority, or at least the large plurality, but most people are supporting this, and that's just the way it is, unfortunately. And so something I wanted to mention earlier about like what I've seen is so there is, some people are claiming that South Africa has pretty much no evidence that could contribute to the fact that to their claim that Israel is committing genocide, meaning is trying to destroy the Palestinian people in part or in whole. Um, and I've seen a lot of people saying things like, well, just give me their address and I'll send them some things. We've all seen the dead bodies. And again, that sort of mentality, like Israel cannot even engage in war. Like as soon as people die, that's it. Uh, it's clearly like Israel is clearly like committing genocide. And I think it's really taking away from like what it is, because try to remember like the actual cases of genocide. The first thing that comes to mind is the Holocaust. That's what the term was created for. And you are equating these two things. You are saying, Israel, and it's Israel is not even going as far as we would want it to, but sort of like Israel trying to defend itself, many times targeting like specific people, specific buildings, trying to minimize the damage on civilians, and you're saying that is genocide, and you're basically equating to what the Nazis did with the death camps. I mean, it's such a perversion. Like it's like the boy who cried wolf. Like when you actually see a genocide, no one would listen to you because you've been overusing it so far. And so yeah, what South Africa has been doing, and the problem is, if there was an actual genocide, the steps would be similar. Actually, you would try to take the nation to court as soon as possible. The fact is, I cannot see a nation that is capable of genocide going to an ICJ, because we've tried that. We've tried to take China to the ICJ, and they said no. And what do you do after that? The fact is, the only reason why Israel, and because Israel does have well, I think misguided trust in the ICJ, it has believed that the United Nations and the ICJ will be objective, or will try to be objective. And if you're not guilty, if Israel knows it's not guilty, then it is willing to go to ICJ. It is willing to defend itself because they believe in the fact that ICJ will rule justly, and the fact that they know they are not committing genocide in any way. But the fact is, yeah, South Africa has been basically using any way they could to basically stop it. And basically, that's sort of like the mechanism the ICJ has. Because, as I've said, when there is an actual genocide, usually, it's only decided like years after it happens because that's the way it sort of works. But what ICJ is supposed to basically help is try to stop it because, South Africa has been saying, okay, let's stop them from going into Rafah, stop them or force them. And I think one of the decisions was that Israel had to basically for one, when you go to ICJ, you also have to like collect evidence on your own behalf. And also, Israel was supposed to establish basically more humanitarian aid. There was also one of the ICJ's decisions, but it's so inverted. I cannot see how people who view or who believe that like ICJ is like a something that could work. I'm really struggling to like see what kind of like nation would that be? Like, oh yeah, we will commit genocide, but yeah, let's go to the ICJ. Like, I'm struggling to see a nation that would be I don't know, so split in mind, so like neurologically like damaged that they couldn't see the sort of a problem of going into court if you're actually already doing that.
Well, that's what Israel is for, to show you such a nation. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the boy who cried wolf. That's
Well,
the thing. That
just quickly, I think the only sort of like a nation that would go to this court is a nation that doesn't commit genocide. Because why the hell would you even like? It's much simpler to just say, I'm not going.
Yeah, but and that's again that's what makes international law such a farce because it's not a real thing in a real country you don't
You
or
don't
a
get a
real legal
choice.
system. Yeah, in a real legal system you don't do that and you also have fewer of these random accusations. You can't go I can't accuse Daniel of sneaking into the US and eating people's cats and
Cats and
geese in
dogs.
Ohio and just say that and I would get in trouble unless I actually bring evidence and but yeah but in this court you don't need that you yeah apparently there are the rules are if you're happy to take part we invite you to do so in Israel really I don't again I said this at the time I don't understand what Netanyahu has to gain in any case the very involvement in it legitimizes the court, legitimizes the discussion over is Israel committing genocide. And Jesse says in the chat, if Israel is going to play the ICJ game anyway, why not bring charges against South Africa, Sudan, and other nations for various crimes? Good question. Look, yeah, again, the fact that this court is such a farce, and Israel doesn't do that, by the way, in much easier scenarios. Just diplomatically, when it gets condemned by Turkey, Turkey, really, Turkey is not a country in a position to condemn anyone, and you can point out why that is. You can point out Egypt being involved in this court case. Egypt is a dictatorship. You want some sort of legal system that's legitimate that defends human rights. You don't, Egypt is the enemy of it's a criminal in such a system. The very existence of it is a crime as the type of regime it is and always has been. By the way, Egypt has never been a legitimate country. But yeah, once you choose to take part in it, you are giving it the legitimacy of a free country engaging with non-free countries to discuss the crimes of the free country attempting to defend itself and continue to exist.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. This whole thing is like it's so clear what is happening that South Africa, as you've said, sort of like the first thing that goes into uh the first headline just into it. And the way people have been misusing the word plausible. And yet the whole way this court works is I mean, as we've said, under if you did something without no evidence, if you try to take me to court, you would be dismissed pretty quickly if you had no evidence to even go in. If you had no evidence to even to even start the trial, you would just be dismissed, and you would most likely be dismissed with prejudice, meaning you wouldn't be able to even file that case again because of how you basically try to abuse the legal system. But yeah, that doesn't seem like it's the case with the ICJ. The fact is, uh South Africa had no evidence going into the court, and basically that's the way it works. Or any evidence they had was from Hamas, from whatever Hamas gave as the numbers. And again, it's yeah, it's just so disturbing. And the fact is, the only reason these things exist is because good nations exist. And the fact that good nations are willing to give it a sanction, again, you wouldn't have you just simply wouldn't have a dictatorship sort of like submitting itself to some sort of like independent inquiry or some sort of like independent viewing unless you could influence it in some way, unless you are actually benefiting from it. It's only the Western countries who sort of have this sort of and I think, well, it's a good thing, but it's being used against it because the Western nations, you know, do have basically they do not want corruption. They do not want, their own armies committing war crimes. They don't want their courts to be corrupt. Generally, Western nations, generally sort of like free nations or liberal nations, want to basically rid themselves of things like this, and that is not the case with dictatorships. And I think I think it was a huge it was a huge problem, the fact that Israel has submitted themselves to the court. But the fact is, they did it under the intention of, we know we are innocent and we think we can prove it in an objective court. The fact is, ICJ is anything but, and that's the problem. You cannot prove your innocence if the law is not objective.
Yeah, and you're trying to prove your innocence to those who are guilty, and those who are guilty, will find you guilty for not being, what they are, what they would want you to be. Although in this case, what they want you to be is dead. So yeah, there is no winning in such a court. But Israel legitimizes it. The only court that I would legitimize is the Ayn Rand Center UK court, which is back in session on Monday. With the Honorable Judge Daniel Kraus, with James Valiant, the prosecutor, Matthew Humphreys, the defense attorney. I will be the defendant. What that case is about Monday evening UK time, I'll tell you more on the reality show, which is one of many reasons to tune in. Basically, because it has to do with the topic of the reality show today, which is the recent events in Emory University. Yes, summer's over. People are back with a nice tan, ready to get protesting again. Yeah, I guess the genocide was on hold and now it is back. Thank you, Bonnie, for the super chat, and thank you, Jonathan, for the super chat. And we will see you in a couple of minutes.
Just quickly, Bonnie
Yes.
is asking why is South Africa doing this rather than some other country. Pretty much any country can take any country into the court, any country that recognizes the authority of the ICJ. But it's not South Africa alone. Many nations have signed up under South Africa.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like a class action lawsuit.
Yeah, and remember, South Africa under the ANC is a failed state, propped up by Russia, Iran, and countries. It would be more difficult for Russia or Iran to bring this case. So that is very likely a part of the reason why it's South Africa. Thank you, Mumu Joe, for the super chat. And yeah, tune in. It's a good show today, the reality show. It was supposed to be the topic of the Daily Objective. We switched it because we have so much to say about it that hopefully we can fit it into an hour. And I will tell you more about the next ARCUK mock trial on Monday. Thanks, Daniel. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.